Today, we have three amazing speakers, and the first one will be online. That's Hiroki Habuka, who's a senior associate at Wadhwani Center for AI and Advanced Technologies, which is Japan's AI governance and Hiroshima's AI process. And he will be talking about Japan's approach to AI regulation, shaping the future of human-machine interaction. And I'm Eleanor Drage. I'm a senior researcher at the University of Cambridge at a centre called the Centre for the Future of Intelligence. And I've been working on an AI regulation tool for some time now on the EU AI Act. So I'm thrilled to be here and listen to these intercultural approaches to AI regulation. Hiroki is a research professor at the Graduate School of Law at Kyoto University and the CEO of Smart Governance. He specializes in agile governance, a multi-stakeholder and distributed governance model that integrates regulation, corporate governance, and system risk management in the field of AI. In addition to this research on agile governance, he serves as an expert advisor on the government to the government as a director of the AI Governance Association. And in 2020, the World Economic Forum's Global Future Councils on Agile Governance and Politics named him one of the world's 50 most influential people in revolutionizing government. He has a master's degree in law from Stanford, a Juris Doctor from the University of Tokyo Law School, and is qualified to practice in Japan and New York State. And he's the author of Introduction to AI Governance from Risk Management to Social Design. He sadly couldn't be here today because of the time zone differences, but I will just now share his video with you, and I'm very looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure and honor to speak here at Cross-Cultural Approaches to Desirable AI. I am Hiroki Habuka, a research professor at Kyoto University Graduate School of Law. I am sorry for not being able to attend real time and hope that we will have another opportunity to talk to each other. Today, I will introduce Japan's approach to AI regulation and how this approach contributes to international rulemaking. So, let me start from Japan's approach to AI regulation. Japan has been actively promoting the implementation of AI systems. While there are certainly economic motivations, there are also unique factors beyond that. First, Japan is facing serious problems of an aging population and labor shortages, leading many to recognize that we need to leverage AI. Additionally, Japan has a robot-friendly culture. The idea of robots living with humans not merely as tools but as friends has long been a topic in animation or manga. This culture may be rooted in Japan's ancient animistic beliefs, where spirits live not only in humans but also in animals, trees, or even stones, so why not computers? Based on these mindsets, the core factors of our AI regulation in Japan are as follows. Firstly, our goal is to optimize the advantage of AI while mitigating its risks to a level acceptable by society. Rather than attempting to eliminate AI risks entirely, we acknowledge that some risks are unavoidable. Therefore, we focus on reducing the risks while maximizing net social benefits. Secondly, we implement sector-specific regulations. AI systems are highly complex, but simply speaking, what they do is statistical analysis of given data to produce the most probable outcomes. In other words, AI is a super efficient statistics and probability calculator, and the decisions based on statistics and probability have long been a part of human activities. So why should AI be subject to a special regulation just because AI can perform the tasks more efficiently and accurately than humans? We must ask this question when considering AI regulation. A simple answer may be that AI can pose high risks depending on its use. Then the next question would be what constitutes high-risk AI? The simple answer is that high-risk AI involves activities that are already regulated, such as driving vehicles, medical diagnosis, or infrastructure maintenance, and so on. There is no controversy that regulations are necessary when AI is used to replace humans in these regulated activities. For this reason, Japan applies sector-specific approaches to AI regulations. Then the question goes, are there any additional risks specific to AI that require additional regulation? This will be discussed later. Secondly, while Japan applies a sector-based approach, many aspects of AI regulations can be shared across sectors, given the common characteristics of AI systems. For example, how to ensure data quality, or conduct safety testing of AI, or how to make sure its transparency are cross-sectoral issues. These are provided under the flexible standards or guidelines, rather than in rigid legal terms, to keep up with evolving technological situations. Third, regarding large multimodal models like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, there is growing recognition of new risks not present in traditional systems, and regulatory discussions are ongoing in the government. But so far, it seems likely that any regulation will be light touch rather than heavy handed. Finally, Japan pursues an agile, multi-stakeholder approach. With today's rapidly changing social and technological landscape, it is not realistic to establish uniform top-down rules. Instead, we aim to continuously update governance mechanisms based on feedback from stakeholders, rather than aiming at perfection from the beginning. Finally, Japan seeks to contribute to global rulemaking through forums such as the G7 and the OECD. I will explain more details about G7 later. So, more concretely, what kind of AI-related laws do we have? Let me begin with sector-specific regulations. Japan has implemented regulatory reforms to promote the use of AI in regulated sectors, which I call Regulation for AI. For example, for autonomous driving, the revised Road Traffic Act and Road Transport Vehicle Act allow Level 4 automated driving. In the finance sector, the Installment Sales Act permits credit card companies to determine credit amounts using data and AI instead of a legislated formula. For infrastructure maintenance, the High Pressure Gas Safety Act allows certified operators to conduct safety inspections without interrupting operations for up to 8 years, instead of requiring annual inspections. In the healthcare sector, discussions are underway to establish an early approval system for AI-based diagnostic software. In addition to these sector-based regulations, Japan is undertaking horizontal regulatory reform to eliminate so-called analog regulations. The Digital Ad Hoc Commission, now a part of the Digital Agency, has revised around 10,000 regulations, ordinances, and notifications requesting analog methods, including written documents, on-site inspections, periodic inspections, and full-time stationing. However, while these reforms clarify that not everything needs to be done by humans, but they do not specify which AI systems can replace human roles. Considering the pace and complexity of technological advancement, such decisions cannot be written in law, but rather standardized gradually through accumulating best practices for each use case. Here is another interesting example of Japanese legislation. In 2017, Japanese copyright law was amended to clarify that using copyrighted works without human enjoyment does not constitute copyright infringement unless it unfairly harms the copyright holder's interests. This is a very pro-innovation regulation, meaning that you can use copyrighted content without the consent of the copywriter when you use it only for machine training purposes. Now, I outline Japan's approach to AI regulation. Next, let's overview the current global landscape for AI rulemaking. To help you understand the speed of policy making on AI, I have listed major AI-related policies introduced since May of this year. I will not go into details today, but there are domestic regulations such as the EU AI Act and international agreements like the G7 Hiroshima AI process and the AI Treaty, as well as guidance and reports from leading international organizations such as the OECD and the UN. This fast and complex situation leaves policymakers, businesses, and all of us wondering how to keep up. So if you don't catch up with everything, don't worry. Nobody can understand all. Okay, there are so many rules worldwide, but to what extent different countries' policies are aligned? This table shows countries joining the G7, AI Treaty, AI Safety Summit, and the OECD and the UN. As depicted in the center blue rectangle, the G7 is involved in all these initiatives. Moreover, the G7 nations, a group of domestic major powers, represents over 25% of the world's GDP. This makes G7's agreements significantly influential globally. This table shows the 12 principles for advanced AI systems agreed upon in the Hiroshima AI process. Since 12 is a big number, I sorted them out into three groups. The first group concerns risk management, where actors should identify risks, mitigate them, and invest in security. The second group relates to trust building by AI actors by appropriately explaining to stakeholders and sharing information about incidents. The third group addresses ethical and societal considerations, encouraging to think beyond your immediate stakeholders to the broader society, such as to address pandemic risks or climate changes. My previous research examined how well these 12 principles align with existing policies across G7 countries, including the EU. Don't worry, I don't expect you to read this in detail, but this crosswork analysis indicates that the Hiroshima AI process principles closely align with current policies in each country. Over 50 countries and regions have now expressed support for the spirit of the Hiroshima AI process, suggesting a good start toward harmonized international rulemaking. Then, what are the commonalities in the G7 countries' approaches to AI regulation? First, while discussions often focus on hard law versus soft law, I don't think that's a rigid metric. All nations employ both hard laws and soft laws, at least in regulated sectors. The primary difference lies in the scope of which hard law applies. I will explain that in the next slide. Second, G7 countries share a risk-based and multi-layered approach. Risk-based approach means allocation of resources based on risks. This applies to different layers of governance phases, such as legislation, monitoring, and organizational management, which I call the multi-layered approach. For example, we could define a high-level framework in the law and provide more details through standards or guidance. However, these standards or guidance cannot cover every detail of appropriate action for all actors. Therefore, individual companies' governance and trust-building efforts remain essential. This is a typical example of a risk-based and multi-layered approach. Also, all G7 members agree that an agile and multi-stakeholder approach is crucial, as emphasized in the 2023 G7 Digital Tech Ministers Statement. Actually, our team at Kyoto University contributed to drafting this concept. Another shared feature is double feedback cycles, which involve not only operational level feedback for AI governance, but also management level feedback for organizational structures and protocol formation. The same approach is reflected in Japan's AI guidances, the US NIST AI Risk Management Framework, and ISO's AI Management Framework. Conversely, what are the differences in the G7 countries' approaches? One clear distinction is whether to adopt a comprehensive regulatory framework for AI or sector-specific regulations. The EU's AI Act takes a comprehensive approach, and Canada is considering a similar one. On the other hand, Japan, the UK, and the US so far take sector-specific approaches. A more fundamental difference lies in what constitutes high risks. What is unique to AI high risk? As I mentioned earlier, all countries agree that AI should be regulated when it performs already regulated activities such as driving a car or giving medical diagnosis. However, the question arises whether activities that would not be regulated if performed by humans should be still regulated when they are done by AI. For instance, manipulating people's behavior, conducting biometric identification, or recognizing emotion are not generally regulated if they were performed by humans, while they could be considered high risks or unacceptable under the EU's AI Act. There are also differences in compliance methods. The EU AI Act mandates human oversight for high-risk AI systems, while other jurisdictions handle this on a case-by-case basis. Finally, there are certain distances among countries as to laws on privacy, intellectual property, and competition. This was a brief introduction to the legal framework related to AI, both in Japan and worldwide. Thank you very much for your attention. This is the end of my presentation.
Well, that was fantastic and actually left me, I love that, the ending of things that are regulated when AI does it, but not when humans do it. And actually, Kerry, who's on the call as well, has done incredible work on emotion recognition, showing that AI doesn't actually do emotion recognition. It cannot do it. So I'd have loved him to be here to talk about things that perhaps we think AI can do, but actually can't, and hence they're regulated. So our next presentation will be by Yulu P, who's a close colleague of mine, a PhD researcher at the University of Warwick, and a Turing Institute Enrichment Fellow, focusing on human AI interaction and AI governance. And she co-developed with me the high-risk EU AI Act toolkit that will be launched very soon, also known as HEAT. For the compliance of the EU AI Act. Before pursuing her PhD, she worked with governmental and international organizations like UNICEF and the WMO across both the global north and the south. And in this talk, she'll discuss how her PhD research advances human-centric and outcome-focused approaches to AI governance. So, Yulu, take it away.
Thank you, Eleanor, for a kind introduction. And thank you so much for having me join this panel with experts like Hiroki and James. So I'm very excited to share some insights from my ongoing project. Let me just share my screen so I can start my presentation. As Eleanor said, in this work, I advocate for a new AI governance direction, one that is more human-centric and outcome-focused. I will explain these two aspects and their implication in a bit, but this is an ongoing project funded by Warwick Policy Support Fund, which will also be the last component of my PhD research. In this presentation, I will first discuss some limitation of the current dominant AI framework, specifically rule-based framework and principle-based framework. You can think them as what Hiroki mentioned, soft law and hard law. While this method have their merit, I will argue they should not be the only approaches within the AI governance ecosystem. In practice, they often fail to deliver governance outcome that truly benefits citizens. So my research proposes a shift towards emphasizing governance outcome, governance impact, rather than solely focusing on rules or principle guiding AI development and regulation. And additionally, I will introduce a concept called interaction-centric knowledge as a key concept to operationalize this governance approach. So one of the most significant challenge in governing rapidly evolving technology like AI is the so-called pacing problem. Technological advancements often progress at a rapid speed, while governance framework lag behind. But as you can see from the slide, I put a question mark next to the pacing problem because this gap is natural, given the time required to understand new technologies, evaluate their impacts, negotiate with different stakeholders to navigate among their sometimes conflicting interests, and then in the end, implement governance strategies. However, this delay can leave citizens, those most affected by this technology, vulnerable to unintended consequences. Currently, there are two dominant frameworks in AI governance. So rule-based governance. Rule-based governance relies on predefined rules that prescribe or prohibit specific actions. While this approach provides clarity and enforceability, it struggles to keep up with evolving technology and cannot account for every possible context. For example, the EU AI Act's initial proposal failed to anticipate the rise of generative AI, ChatGPT, necessitating significant amendment to the initial proposal in order to adopt to the new technological reality. And on the other hand, principle-based governance offers flexibility through high-level abstract principle, but it often relies on companies' self-interpretation and voluntary adherence. This can lead to inconsistent implementation, as principle can be vague and open to different interpretation. Moreover, due to the lack of clear metrics or enforcement mechanism, this approach can result in accountability gap. And in some extreme cases, the exploitation of governance principle for companies' self-serving purposes. So how can we address those challenges? I propose we need a new direction in AI governance. I'm not saying we should move altogether from those existing framework, but we need to have new direction that can address challenges and limitations of those dominant governance approaches. And this new direction should adopt a human-centric model grounded in people's daily experience and placing humans' interest at its core. So instead of simply asking how AI should be developed, how AI should be governed, we should ask what is our collective societal consensus on what type of impact outcome we're willing to accept from AI. And this is where outcome-focused AI governance comes in. This approach is to ensure AI governance is adaptive and flexible, but at the same time, it is deeply rooted in the lived experience of individuals who interact with and are affected by AI system. So I want to emphasize that such an outcome-focused approach is not entirely new. It has been already successfully applied in adjacent, highly impactful field. One notable example is financial regulation, where UK's FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, has pioneered outcome-focused approach in financial sector. The FCA's approach emphasizes the need for regulatory frameworks that focus on end result, such as consumer protection, fair treatment, or systemic market stability, rather than relying solely on prescriptive rules or abstract principles. One practical example of this outcome-focused approach is that FCA publish a market cleanliness statistic every year. And this statistic track abnormal share price movement that occurred before corporate takeover are publicly announced. So rather than setting specific rules to prohibit insider trading, the FCA uses statistic as evidence to monitor and assess the real-world outcome of financial market activity. This data help FCA to identify and intervene potential market manipulation and insider trading by focusing on the actual real-world impacts rather than strictly enforcing the predefined action or prohibition. So borrowing from this model, AI governance can be built on 3 key steps. First, we must clearly define the desirable outcomes of AI governance. This involves articulating as not just a single government, but as a society, the specific benefits we want AI to achieve and harms we want to prevent in various contexts. Secondly, we need to build clear metrics to measure, monitor, and evaluate the accomplishment of those outcomes. These include tracking the real-world impact of AI, documenting AI-related incidents, and very importantly, a crucial part of this process is communicating those results to the public, to the relevant stakeholder. And finally, regulators should be equipped to intervene when one company deviate from the intended outcomes and cause harms. Mechanisms for intervention might include suspending AI systems, imposing fines on AI developers and deployers, or providing remedies to those harmed by AI. So this outcome-focused governance approach is not just a set it and forget it model. It requires continuous evaluation and course correction. As AI technology evolves, our governance strategy must be agile and adaptable. Having discussed the outcome-focused aspect of this new direction, you might ask, where is the human-centric aspect? I argue that one of the key outcomes of AI governance must be the protection of affected individuals, citizens, and consumers. As we discussed earlier, this protection should not rely solely on rigid rules or abstract principles. It should be grounded in real-world outcomes. So take transparency as an example. While transparency is often regarded as a crucial principle in many AI governance framework or for many ethical and responsible AI practice, excessive principle can actually lead to negative outcomes. Cognitive and behavior science have shown that providing too much information, so excessive transparency, can result in information overload, ultimately hindering understanding and failing to achieve the intended outcome. And this has also been confirmed by my previous research, that is a collaboration with UK's financial regulator. So we designed a large-scale experiment with more than 8,000 UK citizens to explore how providing different type of explanation of AI decision can enable consumer to identify and challenge mistakes made by AI systems in creditworthiness context. So our finding reveal that while a detailed explanation of AI decision can enhance users' confidence in identifying mistakes, they can inversely diminish users' actual ability to identify and challenge AI mistakes. So this reveals a gap between people's perception and actual ability. So these behavior insights underscore the need for AI governance that is grounded in empirical research, in research that reveal how humans actually interact with AI, rather than solely rely on theoretical assumption or normative principle. So by examining real-world human-AI interaction, we can better understand how people engage with AI to develop AI governance that reflect this reality or help shape a better one. And this highlights the need for what I call interaction-centric knowledge. So I define interaction-centric knowledge as a deep understanding of how humans interact with AI and how those interactions shape both individual and society. It involves recognizing the complex dynamic between human AI, considering factors such as usability, accessibility, empowerment, and other individual and societal impact. I discussed transparency as an example where interaction-centric knowledge is essential to AI governance, but there are many other governance questions that require such knowledge. For instance, with the rise of social AI and AI companion, questions arise such as what is the appropriate role for AI in providing mental health support and where should boundaries be set? How should AI governance address the risk of long-term emotional attachment or dependency on AI? So those governance challenges demand interaction-centric knowledge gathered from the ground. This approach will allow AI governance to move beyond abstract ethical principle or rigid rule to a more dynamic, evidence-based framework that reflect how people actually interact with AI in real-world context. However, I want to emphasize that this integration of interaction-centric knowledge shouldn't be done just by technical experts like AI developer or behavior scientists. If we do, we risk sticking to a top-down technocratic governance model. Instead, I want to champion a more inclusive AI governance model that actually engage with diverse stakeholders to co-create a governance framework that deeply aligned with societal values. So to recap, the 3 steps of outcome-focused approach should actively involve public participation. So firstly, the outcome should be collaboratively defined with the public to ensure alignment with societal values and priorities. And secondly, the evaluation and intervention processes must be transparent, enabling the public to see how decisions about whether a specific outcome have been achieved, how those decisions are made, so the public can participate in shaping those decisions. And the third point is interaction-centric knowledge must be integrated into the process, ensuring the real-world human experience and interaction with AI system inform governance decision. So this will allow us to move away from seeing the public as passive recipients of technological innovation or regulatory decisions to recognizing the public as active co-creator of technological meanings and governance approach. And lastly, as I stressed before, this outcome-focused approach should complement existing governance framework, combining its strengths with rule-based and principle-based method. In some cases, rule-based governance is sufficient, particularly when the risks and impacts of AI are well-defined and predictable. However, in some contexts, as the governance question that I raised before, those contexts, the effects of AI are more complex and uncertain, and outcome-focused approach become more crucial. So at this point, I hope I successfully conveyed the vision for this new direction in AI governance. This is still an ongoing project, so the next step is to explore how to generate interaction-centric knowledge. In my previous studies, I conducted experiments, but other methods such as focus group or public attitude service can also be very valuable for producing such knowledge. And we also need to understand how to use such knowledge. Should AI governance be adjusted to align with interaction-centric insights, or those insights can help our society shape better interaction model with AI? For instance, we can explore how to leverage interaction-centric knowledge to prevent addiction to social media platform among teenagers. So more importantly, we need to understand how we can incorporate this knowledge into AI governance decision. This integration has been a long-standing research topic and governance challenge, particularly regarding how to use behavior insights to enhance evidence-based policymaking. Yeah, I will pause there. I'm very excited to hear your thoughts and any comments about this work. Yeah, thank you very much. I will stop my screen.
Thank you so much, Yulu. That was fantastic. And there's lots of questions emerging in the chat. If you have more questions, please do add them in, and we will discuss them after. So yeah, that's really brilliant. And a really nice introduction also to citizen-centric approaches that I hope we will pursue a little bit more as well in this panel. So next we have James Wright, who will talk about UNESCO's approach to AI ethics and governance. James is a program specialist in UNESCO's Ethics of AI unit within the social and human sciences sector, where his work focuses on supporting member states to implement UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of AI. He previously worked on intercultural AI ethics and public policy research at Alan Turing and received his PhD in anthropology and science and technology studies from the University of Hong Kong. Take it away, James.
Great, thanks a lot for that introduction, and many thanks to Eleanor and Kerry for organizing this seminar series and kindly inviting me to speak. So yeah, my background is in anthropology and STS, but today I'm going to be talking very much with my UNESCO hat on. I'm going to lay out how we approach AI ethics and governance from an international, intercultural perspective, and also present some of the tools that we're using to foster a responsible, ethical, equitable AI ecosystem across UNESCO's member states. I think, I don't know, maybe my talk can kind of bridge the two previous talks a little bit. Super interesting, and I think we're going to have some interesting discussions. So let me just share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see this. Okay, so I mean, you may associate UNESCO with cultural heritage. The world's UNESCO World Heritage Sites. You may be asking, like, why on earth would UNESCO touch AI ethics? But actually, the S in UNESCO that comes from actually Joseph Needham's advocacy after the Second World War. Originally, UNESCO was going to be UNESCO, but he strongly lobbied that the S for sciences should be included. So UNESCO is actually the only organization in the UN system with the remit for science as a whole. We have a sector that focuses on natural sciences and also social and human sciences. And then within social and human sciences, as Eleanor mentioned, that's the sector that I'm in. We have a bioethics and ethics of science and technology section. And within that section, we also have the ethics of AI team, which is where I'm based. And this, the bioethics team as a whole, the section, has a history of leading global dialogue and implementing ethical frameworks for science and technology. So actually, one of the main functions of UNESCO is to develop these normative instruments. So there are three types for people that may not be completely familiar. We have declarations, recommendations, and conventions. So JP Singh has a really great book about the history of UNESCO. And he kind of describes how, declarations are these moral suasions or imperatives, focusing on important matters. Conventions are the legally binding treaties that states are supposed to ratify through their domestic legislation. And then recommendations fall kind of in the middle. So they're invitations for member states to take particular courses of action, including changing domestic practices, laws, or institutions. So the reason for giving that kind of background is to introduce the recommendation on the ethics of AI. This was adopted by acclamation by all 193 member states of UNESCO in 2021. Actually, it covers 194 member states because the US just rejoined UNESCO last year. It's significant because this is the only globally agreed, globally adopted normative instrument on ethics of AI. And given the state of geopolitics today, it may be the only one that we get. So I'll run through very quickly what this recommendation is made up of, because this forms the basis for all of our work on AI ethics and governance at UNESCO. So we have, the recommendation sets out a set of 4 ethical principles. Values, which are then broken down into 10 different principles. So the core of the recommendation is its basis on respecting, protecting and promoting human rights, human dignity and fundamental freedoms, Very significantly, another key core value is environment and ecosystem flourishing. So in a sense, this isn't just human-centric, it's also kind of biocentric. And obviously, this is becoming more and more significant as we see the environmental impacts of, for instance, data centers, the use of energy and also water, and the mining of rare earths or the elements that go into the development of the chips and the other hardware that make up AI systems and infrastructures. And we have ensuring diversity and inclusiveness and living in peaceful, just, and interconnected societies. I won't go through all the principles because I'm sure that many people on this call would be very familiar with these kinds of principles: proportionality and do no harm, safety and security, and so on. But I think, at this time in 2021, I'm sure you'll recall that there are many, actually hundreds of different sets of ethical values and principles for AI. All the major international groupings of countries and international organizations had their own sets of principles. But there are two things that kind of set apart, I think, UNESCO's recommendation. The first is that it's the only set of values and principles in AI ethics that have been adopted by almost all countries. And the second is that it actually goes beyond just setting out ethical values and principles. It also sets out 11 different policy chapters with very tangible guidance on policies that could be implemented by member states. So in areas like data policy, gender, development and international cooperation, environment and ecosystems, and so on. I should also mention that the recommendation specifically prohibits the use of AI for mass surveillance or social scoring, and it also prohibits granting legal personality or rights to AI systems. So the aim of this recommendation is for member states to put in place the policies, the laws, the institutions to facilitate an ethical, equitable, responsible ecosystem for AI across the whole life cycle of AI systems. So from the research stage, design and development, through to deployment, use, maintenance, termination, and so on. The aim of this is not to develop, ethical AI, because we don't ascribe to AI the moral agency to be ethical, but it's instead to support member states to create this ecosystem in which AI can be developed and deployed ethically. So what does this look like in practice? So we're currently actively working with 60 countries to support their implementation of the recommendation. This slide, which has a lot of writing on it, too much writing on it, just gives an overview of what we're doing, starting with what we call the AI Readiness Assessment Methodology, or the RAM. We also have various other things here, which I'll go through in very briefly. But the RAM is really important for us. It's a tool that we use to gather information about member states, or for member states to gather information about, their own situation as regards AI ethics and governance. So it's effectively a long questionnaire that asks qualitative and quantitative questions across 5 different dimensions of readiness to implement AI ethically and responsibly. So the questions range across, the legal and regulatory dimension, asking what laws are in place to govern AI, and also AI adjacent, other laws that have a bearing on how AI is regulated. So for instance, data protection, cybersecurity, laws around critical infrastructure, and so on. It asks about AI strategy, principles, what's in place in different sectors, if there's prioritization of different sectors in relation to AI, and so on. There's also a dimension of technological and infrastructural dimension, which goes everywhere from gathering information about the coverage of mobile telephony through to broadband, the average broadband speed, all the way through to, for instance, cloud computing policy, the number of data centers, supercompute capacity. So it's really, as with the other dimensions, it's really broad. It's aimed to gather information across all of our 194 member states, many of which don't collect a lot of data that might be available, for instance, through OECD member countries. And the idea is to give a really comprehensive view of AI readiness across all these different areas. So the other dimensions are scientific and educational, social and cultural, and economic. So things like, what is the talent concentration in areas related to the AI industry? What's the level of capital investment from government and private sector? What's the number of AI startups, and so on? So this is one part of this, is to gather the data about AI readiness. The second kind of stage of this RAM process is to do national public multi-stakeholder consultations. So this is where we gather what are the political priorities around AI governance, and what are public concerns around the potential impacts of AI, and thinking about how it should be regulated. And finally, we produce a report. You can see some of them on this slide, which kind of summarizes all of this data and then provides empirically grounded policy recommendations, really tangible recommendations to governments for how they can align their national AI strategy with UNESCO's recommendation. Obviously, we're working with 60 countries. There's kind of too much to be able to summarize in simple terms, or generic terms, what our findings are at this stage. And it's still kind of in process. But I think we're getting really interesting insights, especially from global majority countries, about what their concerns are around AI and its governance. We often hear about from governments saying, how can they harness the economic potential of AI? But there's been a lot of interest in what are so-called low resource or long tail languages. So, for instance, in Brazil, there are more than 200 languages spoken. And the question is how can those communities, those minority language speaking groups not be left behind through the development of large language models, for instance? And how could they be potentially empowered through the development of AI systems that they can interact more easily with government services? There's also a lot of interest in frugal AI in countries like Senegal. In Chile, we had a very interesting recommendation to develop more decentralized AI policy at the municipal level. And there's also generally a lot of interest in regional cooperation to pool, for instance, compute resources, regulatory expertise, and also regional responsible data sharing. So the RAM is our kind of macro level tool to help countries, governments understand where they stand in relation to AI readiness. Alongside that, we've developed an ethical impact assessment tool which is specifically aimed initially for government procurement departments to be able to know what questions to ask to assess AI systems and understand, what are the potential ethical risks and what are the potential benefits in relation to all of the different principles of the UNESCO recommendation. So we're currently in the process of piloting this tool and revising it. And then we also have, in order to implement these tools, several different expert networks. So here we've got the AI Ethics Experts Without Borders network that was launched earlier this year. It's a very diverse group of experts, so more than 100 people from over 50 different countries. And the focus here is on interdisciplinarity as well as, intercultural cooperation. So these experts are kind of working to implement the readiness assessment report recommendations. And we're really trying to foster kind of regional expertise and international cooperation. So it's definitely not a case of parachuting in like global north experts to global majority countries. The idea is to develop mutual learning and capacity building. We also have Women for Ethics of AI platform, which is focused on the gender chapter of the policy recommendations. We also, in order to engage with the private sector, which is obviously crucial because these are the companies which are actually developing many of the models, we have a Business Council for Ethics of AI, which is co-chaired by Microsoft and Telefonica. And most recently, we've just announced a new AI governance disclosure instrument that we've developed in cooperation with the Thomson Reuters Foundation. And so this is a tool to allow companies to disclose what they're doing around AI governance and AI ethics internally. So, what internal governance mechanisms they have, what's their strategy, what are the processes that they have in place, what training do they give their staff in relation to ethical issues for AI systems that they may be developing and deploying. And just to finish, we have a big kind of flagship event every year called the Global Forum on Ethics of AI. The next one's going to be in June in Bangkok, and we'll be doing a call for papers in the next month or so. So we'd really welcome anyone who may be listening to apply for that. The event's going to be live streamed, and it's basically a forum to bring together all of the different stakeholders that we're engaging with across governments, academia, private sector, civil society, to get together and discuss like the findings of these readiness assessments, the latest research on AI governance, some of which we've just heard. So apologies for kind of bombarding you with like all of these different initiatives from UNESCO. But I think, this is what an international, intercultural, interdisciplinary approach to AI governance looks like in practice at the international level. Very messy, lots of different strands, very difficult to bring together. I don't think there are any neat solutions. The recommendation doesn't actually mandate what model of AI governance should be implemented by member states. It's left to member states to decide for themselves, of course. But we also, obviously, this is a transnational technology. It's very complex in all of the countries that we operate. It's impacting every single sector, every single ministry, government ministry that we're working with. And so necessarily the dialogue has to be intercultural, interdisciplinary, international, regional as well. And that's what we're trying to do through this work. So that's a very quick overview, and look forward to the discussion. And if anyone has any questions or comments later, they can get in touch by email. Thanks.
Well, that was also fascinating and incredible work, getting all those different member states together, and establishing any form of consensus, I think, is so valuable. So we're all very grateful for this incredible endeavor.